Welcome back to Roll on the Adventure, the role-playing game podcast where there are only 3 skills of note: rooting, tooting, and shooting. Cue the intro. Roll on the adventure.
The adventure.
Roll
on the adventure,
Roll
man.
on the
Roll
adventure.
The adventure. Roll on
the adventure.
Well,
That's
singing up quite well. I like that.
It's getting better.
I don't know.
I don't know.
It needs more
It gets
recorder.
better. It gets better. No, it doesn't. Anyway, so in the last part, we figured out the tagline and title for The Frontier of Time, where we are a bunch of paradox wranglers on the frontiers of time, saving reality by breaking reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And now we're going to be figuring out how that works.
So, point of order, I, in the first part, was very resisting the ability saying that our game has 3 stats, rooting, tooting, and shooting. So thank you. Thank you for suggesting it so I didn't have to.
Okay, well, I mean, that could be... Okay, legitimately, we might as well talk about that, because we were sort of talking about how there's not many stats in the game yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of it's tag-based.
There aren't any in the game.
Yeah, I like the idea that... So, essentially... Because it seems that the major thing we can do in order to change the result of something is to shoot it with the gun. I'm not sure what we're going to call it yet. I'm just going to call it the gun.
Yeah.
And that's the major thing we can do. That's our agency.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I like calling it the agency.
That's what the pistol is called. It's like a number 3 cult agency.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to call, because, you know, if we're leaning into the schlockiness of this kind of like time jumping sci-fi, that it's called like a time revolver, because that feels like that has multiple meanings.
That's fair. That's pretty cool title, actually.
I'm just thinking there's like clock hands on it.
Mm-hmm.
in the barrel.
Do we want to have other stats like rooting and shooting, which can also change how things are?
Yeah, I
maybe not as drastically as using the time revolver, but in other ways.
Well, there's a lot of passive stuff like spotting things. There's also your actual accuracy with the time gun, which could be really interesting.
I really don't like the idea of you missing the shot. Like, if you take the shot and apply an adjective, it has to work, I think.
It has to apply the adjective to something.
Yeah, I think it's less the idea that you miss and the adjective isn't applied. I think it's you miss and the adjective's now applied to a fly, and now you've got like a 6-ton fly in the room.
Or is misapplied it's like it's a different sense, maybe.
Oh, so is it a thing where, like, if you win as the person who's rolling, you get to decide what it hits? If you fail, then the GM gets to decide where it hits.
See, what I'm kind of thinking is that you should, like, through clever planning or whatever, you should always be able, like, there may be obstacles in the way, but you should always be able to get it down to a sure shot. And bear in mind, like, a sure shot for a time cowboy is like a terrible shot for anybody else. I mean, you can hit like a small bottle from like a couple of 100 yards away.
Oh yeah,
like
I would say that the threshold
of the
for shooting something is actually quite low.
Well, that's not even a roll. You just hit it at that stage. But like,
the idea is getting in the circumstance.
Yeah, the more of a trick shot it is, the more like chance there is for something to go wrong.
Okay, so I like the idea then that the time revolver isn't how you necessarily do everything. It's the thing that decides something.
So here's my thought on that.
Okay.
You start off with 0 dice, right?
Yep.
And if like on 0 dice you just win, right? And then if you're doing like if you're firing through like a couple of windows or something, you add a die. And if then you're firing it through a couple of windows and bouncing it off off like something, then that's 2 dice. And then that you're basically, you roll those dice, and if they come up like 5 or 6, for instance, then something has gone a bit wrong.
Okay, so would this be threshold based in the sense that once you have dice, like let's say there's always a threshold, so the threshold is 4. and you need to go below it in order to hit it.
I'm not sure if it's. I honestly think that just having dice that say this is the risk dice, and if you roll say poor successes on the risk dice, then instead of adding them up.
Oh yeah, but some kind of threshold, either a threshold of successes or a threshold of number.
Oh no, you want exactly 0 successes.
Yeah, but you'd have to call them failures because that's going to be so confusing otherwise.
Yeah.
But literally, I like the idea that there is some ability to fail.
Yeah.
And still win.
But like I say, if you roll like with these dice and you get whatever that we call them, like if it's a glancing hit, say.
I like the idea of a glitch.
Yeah.
So let's say, just as an example, obviously, let's say you have to ricochet your bullet off something to hit something else.
Yeah.
And because of that, the DM says, okay, that's 2 dice, roll them. And inside the DM's head, they have a threshold of glitches you are allowed to have before the thing fails. So let's say 1 glitch. If you get 1 glitch or more, you fail. Right? You then roll the dice, and if they come up 5 or 6 on either of those dice, that counts as 1 glitch. So if 5 or 6 on one dice, that's a glitch. If 5 or 6 on the other dice, that's a glitch. You could have maximum 2 possible glitches, in which case you fail. Any other number is counted as a not glitch. So you just need to get below that threshold number in the person's mind, because I think that's important. Because if it's you fail or glitch somehow, if you roll 5 or 6, regardless of that, there's no threshold number at all, then that doesn't. Then the DM could either say you fail arbitrarily because you rolled a glitch on 1 dice, or they could say you don't fail at all, even though you rolled glitches on 5. And that just seems very arbitrary. So there should be like a thing the DM establishes beforehand and says, this is the threshold, and this will not change.
I mean, a part of like cowboy western aesthetic is dice games and rolling snake eyes. So
Okay.
I would figure that actually rolling over is still the better option, and 1s and 2s glitch instead.
Okay, so
in my mind anyway, to kind of like take a spin on how you've kind of suggested the framing, the player wants to make a shot, and the longer or more complicated of this shot, the GM is like, okay, that's a 1 dice difficulty, 2 dice difficulty, 3 dice difficulty. If they roll a 1 or 2 on any of those die, then the shot goes wide in some way.
Right.
Because then the more dice you're rolling, the larger chance of failure, but it's still actually pretty low. You're still more likely to succeed than not, and I think that's probably relatively important in a silly game like this. Well, I don't know. It depends on how often you want to kind of put the end result in the GM's hands or the player's hands of where the bullet goes.
But then that seems entirely unfair, especially if you're rolling quite a few dice where it's very likely that can happen.
Yeah.
Well, then you shouldn't be taking so massive risks.
That's true, actually, yeah.
Yeah, I think the ability for the player to be like, it's a long shot, and then the GM's like, sure it is, roll 3 dice. I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you're rolling 6 dice, you're trying to hit the thing from orbit. So, like...
That's true.
Okay,
that actually makes sense.
Just think about the anime as heck shots that you can land if you don't glitch on like 4 or 5 dice.
Although, yeah, exactly.
I personally would want to put the difficulty cap to like 3 dice maximum, but if we want to kind of take it to because then it gives a hard it gives a hard limit on how difficult the GM can make the shot.
I like the idea of 6 or 5. Like 5 is a round number, but 6 is also cool, where 6 is the most difficult thing you're trying to do. Like, you are trying to hit this thing from orbit. Like, this is the most difficult thing, and anything else is just impossible. So, like, if you're trying to hit it from another freaking planet, then you're just like, well, okay, no. Or, like, you can try, but this is going to be incredibly difficult.
I mean, yeah, you're like... 3 dice, you're trying to hit a move, like a thing in the back of a car, like the air freshener in the back of on the the rear view mirror of a car. that's
Yeah.
speeding away from you, and you've just dived out through a plate glass window.
I think that'd be more like a 4, but
I reckon that's like 2 or 3. One for it
I-
being a small target, and one for a lot of movement.
I would say that's 4 because you're moving,
Yeah.
it's moving, and it's small. But
I think it depends how heroic we want the characters to be.
I think I like the idea that in that case, so one of the things that was suggested by just recently was the idea of, instead of having 5 and 6s be glitches or like failures, having 1 or 2s be glitches / failures and calling them snake eyes.
I mean, that works.
I mean, it's the same mathematically, but it just gives it a bit more of a theming. Also, now that we're kind of talking about setting the difficulty of shots, I get a bit of a better impression. There we go, of what rootin', tootin', and shooting might do. So in my head, these 3 stats, you have these 3 stats, and you can assign 1, 2, and 3 to them in any order that you like. And what shooting does as a stat is mitigate some of the risk factor in your shots, possibly.
You roll you can roll less glitch dice, possibly.
Yeah, or some kind of way to make risky shots easier. My initial kind of thought was shooting stat lets you determine how many bullets you fire in one go. So if you're super reckless and you have like burning and expanding in your 2 next shots on your thing, you can then fire twice as one action, which would be fun. And I kind of feel that there has to be some way to be able to do that. But maybe that's maybe that's rootin'. I don't actually know what rootin' means.
I like the idea. I also don't know what rootin' is, but my inclination is, because in stats you generally have 3 kind of things. You have, so social, utility, and combat. Like that, those are the 3 main things, really.
And it feels like rooting is like physical actions, tooting is social actions, and shooting is your time gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea. Rooting is like, searching, perceiving, doing stuff, like physical stuff that isn't shooting the gun. And then tooting, like you say, is, talking, intimidating, deception.
Literal tooting on a trumpet if you're like a jazz cop.
Okay.
I don't know.
I've searched Google for the answer to our question. Rooting comes from its sense of nosing, grubbing, or poking around.
That is nice.
Well, I mean, it's rooting around, so that makes sense.
And also tooting, which as I assumed, is support. So when I hear rooting, tooting, and shooting, I hear inquiry, buff an ally, inquiry, buffing, or attack.
I mean, the only issue with using tooting as buffing is then you essentially have only 2 stats. You have shooting and rooting, because the only thing that tooting can do is support either yourself or someone else. I like the idea of taking a non-literal translation of tooting and saying it is speaking. Like,
or in other ways, dealing with people that aren't time cops in ways that aren't shooting them with weird magic bullets.
Diplomacy.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a maybe a help mechanic. I also like the idea that shooting is its own stat, which is really good because shooting is actually the most important thing in the game in terms of winning.
Or is it?
Or is it? Because I mean, you can like toot in your way to victory and have a 1 in shooting if you want. I think having excuse me, apologies. I think having rooting and tooting be really, really broad in what they do is quite important. To bring up Hack the Planet, you get 2 stats: meat space and cyberspace. And meat space is everything that you do that's not on the internet, and that's the only division between the 2. And that works really, really well because those are the 2 things that you're going to be doing. You're either going to be skateboarding around or you're going to be hacking.
I reckon most of the time in this game, though, you're going to be rooting or tooting. And occasionally
I figure if you're investigators and you're dimensional investigators, then the 2 things you're going to be doing is investigating what's going on and smooth talking your way to the thing. So that makes sense.
The way I see it is like rooting and tooting are most important because you're using them a lot more of the time than shooting. But shooting is also incredibly important because it's the most important action you'll take in terms of winning the game. Like it's the final thing, it's the final shot of anything else, you can't do it. I like the idea of having a 1, 2, 3 system. So like either maybe not dice, but essentially points.
Well, it's how many glitch dice that you can get rid of. Maybe.
Yeah, so you choose. Here's the question then: do you choose to spend a point? So can you burn something, or is it just you use it and it's part of that stat? So is there an option where you can essentially burn that dice of, say, shooting, and make it easier? but now in any other reset, or maybe if you save state, you no longer have that. So now you're permanently worse at shooting.
I think it should probably be daily.
Okay, yeah, daily works, I think, especially because 1-pointers are like,
Well, it means you can ignore a glitch.
That's true.
So that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
One notice on glitches, or whatever we choose to call them. I like so going back to the world mechanic, where you can choose to reset the world and something disappears or something changes.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea that every time that happens, let's say there's a hard limit of 5 worlds, there's 5 chances, 5 lives.
Mm-hmm.
Every time that happens, presumably something bad is going to happen, or at least something, weird. So it's going to make it more difficult for you to do the thing you're trying to do in some circumstance.
I think it messes with your information a lot. That's the main thing that I was going for, but
I like the mechanical idea that it permanently adds 1 dice to a roll you make. So, like, if you're trying to shoot an anti-grav, that's not going to change. There's always going to be 1 glitch dice there, no matter what you do. So I like the idea that it just keeps getting worse. Like that's why having a lot of in shooting, for example, would become very useful later on, because it's not useful at the start, but it can be useful when the entire world is blowing up and you're the only one that can shoot stuff really good.
It does mean that people will not try like stupid like clutch plays right at the end, which I think is kind of not thematic. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You don't get. Yeah, I think it would dissuade people from taking crazy risks later on.
Mm-hmm. The potential increase in daring do as you go.
Okay,
sure.
So in that case, I guess my question, because we seem to have figured out, I guess, like how actions in the game work, because this is theatre of the minding. We're not, there isn't a battle mat here. So it's not like you move X meters and then do X. It is, I shoot the thing.
Yeah, everything uses the glitch system, which is good for the GM because it means that if you cock up your like tooting roll to tail, or your rooting roll to tail a guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not necessarily something sensible. It could be that you've attracted the attention of the rustlers. It could be that you're obviously not supposed to be in this time, and you accidentally glitch through a wall while you press yourself against a wall, like tailing someone, and you accidentally pass through it, and stuff like that. Like it gives the GM quite a lot of latitude.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I agree. That definitely works.
And also that extra latitude. It could be that you go through the wall into someone's like living room, and then you find out about something about a character, and that gives you some new ideas.
Yeah, I mean that's up to DM. I think this is a very like DM improv heavy system, which works for us. But it's definitely the kind of thing where you don't set too much; you just give parameters essentially.
Yeah, I think everybody gets to kind of improv quite heavily in this, really. How I kind of assume conflict resolution would go is that if you don't glitch, you as a player get to say what happens, pretty much. There's a general kind of like GM right of veto for heinous BS, but everybody's got the social contract to buy into this, right?
It's basically the same as in most systems, where it's like, I want to convince the bartender to give me the information. Okay, well, you rolled good enough to do that. What do you say? That makes sense.
Then on the GM side of things, if there's glitches, then maybe it's kind of like a light suggestion rather than a hard and fast rule, but it kind of feels like the number of glitches that show up, you still fail even if there's one glitch, but the severity of the F up is kind of like ratcheted up by severe degrees.
With one glitch, you can probably just about succeed with a serious you can succeed with a consequence.
Yeah, the Jin could be like, okay, you get what you're doing, but things are worse for you. And if you've like glitched twice, it's like, oh,
I mean,
oh boy.
You could always give the player the choice. It's like, do you want to succeed at a cost?
I like that idea, because that's always a good choice to give a player. Is like, you can choose to succeed, but something bad will happen to you.
I mean, I think that should be
Oh
optional.
no, I definitely think it's optional. I definitely think it's an optional thing of, do you want to miss or do you want to hit but have something bad happen?
Yeah. Because sometimes the GM won't have a good idea for something bad, and you just want.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. Like I do something similar in my role playing games when people roll the same dice result. Okay, so then my question is sort of going back to this, because we've kind of vetoed having the change in the world permanently change how many glitch dice there are in a roll. How does the loss or gain of weird tags change the game? Like mechanically, how's it change the game?
Right. If you are if you are in opposition to a tag, if you're working with a tag, that can decrease the number of glitch dice. If you're working against a tag, that can increase the number of glitch dice.
Okay, so again, that's sort of up to DM's interpretation.
I mean, I think that we can let players try blag them and let GMs try stack them against players.
So one thing I guess because we've talked about the idea of having the adjectives in the game in the time revolver being set up by the players at the start of a, let's say, game, as a, start of the campaign ish.
Well, it's what they brought in with them. They don't get new stock, so they have to find it in the world.
Oh yeah, but they set up a starting stock and then they can find stuff, but that's what they do. Obviously, the worlds like tags, I think would have to be a bit more specific. So they're set, and maybe you have a couple that change every game, but otherwise they stay the same. So like gravity would be one I would say is most of the time always there. Like it's not it is never assumed.
I think that like the GM should set it up to like what is important in this, because I think what you're kind of getting at with not assuming gravity is that the GM could add an anti-gravity tag later. Setting something up as a tag means that it's very likely to go.
But that's the idea. I think of, to be fair, this might just be a misconception. When I think of the tag disappearing, I think of the opposite thing happening, as opposed to it disappearing. So when gravity disappears, what's the opposite of gravity? It's anti-gravity.
I was going to suggest that actually, that if two things. I really like the idea that at the start of the game, the players and the GM submit a whole bunch of words for bullets, and they're just there in a hat that's pulled from. And I guess you do an action in the environment to pull bullets for the gun. But the tags,
I don't know about pulling them during play. Like that's definitely for the setup.
There's something about the idea of if you're out of bullets, being able to pull new ones and not knowing what they are that I find really like chaotic and interesting. But anyway, on the GM side of things about the kind of like world tags, I agree that having them be dual, being both what they are normally and then what it might be when broken, even if when they break we decide as a table what the opposite would be or what the alternate version would be, but just to give it a different state so there's still a tag to work with. Because I really like the idea of what you're suggesting about if you're working with a tag, that doesn't incur penalties, but working against a tag does, that kind of thing. Like if a world tag is getting in the way of what you're trying to do, that incurs like a glitch dice penalty. I think that makes a lot of sense and is using the tags no matter what they say. So therefore it makes sense to kind of keep a number of tags, even if the ones that are now there are actively harmful to you.
So in that case, because I've been interpreting the lives situation as literally there is 5 tags. Once those 5 tags disappear, then the game ends. I like the idea that you still have 5 lives, but that's now more of an abstract thing. That is like you have 5 things until the world no longer can take what's happening to it.
I mean, the other one is that if you reverse the tag, the problem is what I don't want is to say that if you reverse the tag, the players can't use it anymore, or it can only work against them. Because
I mean,
that like plays down the ideas for like zero gravity gunfights and stuff, and I don't think we should ever do that.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. I think so there is to pull from other RPGs, there is a game called Misspent Youth that is pretty cool. You are you're a group of anarchic teens who are trying to kind of survive in a hostile, oppressive world, and all of you have 4, maybe 5 stats. And whenever you fail a roll using that stat, you can sell out that stat and it becomes something else. Yeah. So you can turn from being charming to being cold. Yeah. And you can still use cold, but if you sell out all of your stats, then you essentially die.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what this is in terms of the world state tags, in that they're turned to alternate or destroyed ones, and they still work. But if you destroy all of them, then the world collapses.
Yeah, I do like the idea of being able to put in like weird and alien tags instead of just opposites.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely agree. That's more fun than just having opposites, because there's only so many times you can have antigraphs and have it be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I also don't think that the set of tags for the world should be static.
I don't think they should be static.
I think we should suggest some. But honestly, I think they should be what's important.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're trying to do a sort of, if you're trying to do like a Western type thing, you could have isolated and dusty and things like that. Things that are really sort of evocative.
Okay, so it's more specific to the scenario rather than the world per se.
It's like a feeling. So you get basically your time wranglers get rewarded for playing into the themes of the adventure.
I like,
which I kind of like. And then those themes get reversed and twisted, and suddenly everything's a little bit different.
I like the idea that you're on like this fairly traditional old Western, like train heist thing, and then suddenly like Dusty disappears or changes or something. I'm not sure what we'll call it.
To corrosive or something. You're like, oh, okay, the sand is now...
Or like underwater, and now everyone's in like submarine suits, and you're just like, what's going on?
Or even something like, it's dusty, and it's like, if you change it to like malevolent or something, so people are getting, like, the atmosphere is just anger and rage, and it changes how people react to each other.
Yeah.
We're now in the stress desert.
I like the idea that the DM describes how those tags change things. So like I was going to say that it should be specific. So like if you have Dusty, like Dusty applies to the landscape, presumably, like that's what it applies to. If you change it to underwater, that also applies to the landscape. I would have said you don't necessarily want something that wouldn't apply to a landscape. But if
so there are slots for the tags, but the GM can write in what those tags are based on the scenario.
That could be a thing.
That makes sense.
Having like a landscape tag, or maybe something like that. Essentially, not making it so it's impossible for the DM to describe how that thing would change that thing. But I think that's more up to the DM being creative in a certain sense. Yeah. So I'm not...
Because I would be personally okay with GMs having 5 slots for tags and they can just decide what they are as part of the scenario that they've written.
Yeah.
I know that there are definitely people out there that would be into this idea, but stunned at the choice of being given so nebulous the options to choose. Because like in Played by the Apocalypse games, when you make a character, it gives you options for what your eyes look like.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like, why do you need to hold my hand throughout that process? But there are people that love having those categories to specifically get them to be creative. And that might be useful.
I like the idea that at the start, maybe not as a hard and fast rule, but as a suggestion, like the guidebook will say, like, these are the slots, make your prompts around these slots, and then stuff can go weird. or you can choose to keep those slots based on how comfortable you feel with that improvisation.
Yeah.
But it's actually like world gen. Like world gen will be choose a landscape prompt, choose a character prompt, choose a blah 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 blah, and then throughout the game, dependent on how comfortable the DM feels with improvising based around prompts, they can say, okay, none of these classes exist now, so you can give me whatever and I'll adapt it somehow. Or these classes still exist, please give me something that won't be too hard for me to use. I think that'd be a nice optional rule just to make it more approachable for all DMs.
That's always a good thing.
Okay.
I generally enjoy the level of being able as a player to discuss with your DM about how certain things change like that. Like, it feels like everybody got the choice to decide how this world has been horribly destroyed if something breaks, and then everybody gets to discuss about what it changes to. So that's neat.
Okay, so I guess we've sort of discussed then how tags work in at least a way enough that we can figure it out. We've discussed characters and how they can do things to the world. One thing we haven't discussed as much is the idea of resetting. So resetting is definitely an important thing in this game. It's the way you lose lives. It's the way you eventually can lose. And we've also talked about maybe some circumstances in which you're forced to reset. So maybe I still don't know about the idea of the paradox wranglers having health works.
Yeah, I think if you're a weird interdimensional being, then death is not really so much of a big deal. I think death is a narrative thing, especially if we're dealing with the idea of, okay. So one thing that we've not touched on a little bit is the idea of having multiple characters.
Oh yeah, that's a thing.
So I think death is actually pretty easy, and maybe probably something that will happen to you if, for example, you get 2 glitch dice in a row. Then this is something that's bad enough that will kill your character. And you then, the next version of you that gets to show up, you get to reassign your rootin' tootin' and shooting.
So yeah, kind of a bit like the fluff of was it Infinity Blade, that iOS game where your characters did die, but you just sort of showed up again as that character's descendant. You started off, it was just, okay, this guy's son goes to avenge him, and before you know it, you sort of got this whole long running family tree. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the thing I think I got the impression we're going for here was while there were consequences for us failing, we weren't the ones who had to deal with them.
It's the world that we've shown up and ruined. Yeah.
I mean, like, we obviously want to keep it in the timeline, but that's a gain for us rather than a loss.
There is something that personally tickles me about the idea of you all playing time police, and essentially you just go to different communities and make it worse. That is a parable.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I don't know if we're actually like real police. We're more like a posse.
Oh yeah. There's I think this is the concept of quote unquote time police, I think, is something that's relatively easily understood. And you are all essentially outlaws. If you're cowboys are inherently outlaws, even if they are peacekeepers.
Well, I mean, you're also time police.
I mean, maybe we've been like, seconded by the time sheriff.
Oh gosh, the time sheriff is like the person who gives you the mission at the. Is the GM called the time sheriff?
Yes, the GM is called the time sheriff.
Good. Glad we resolved that. That was important. But yeah, I think dying is a thing that happens narratively quite easily. I think even players themselves can be like, nah, this is a thing that kills my character.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, because sometimes that will be advantageous.
Yeah, you ran over me with your cart, and I'm actually dead, so it matters. I love the idea of people just doing stupid stuff to kill themselves because it actually helps solve the situation.
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, well, when the guys find the dead body, they're gonna panic, right?
I was like, oh no, that guy's about to be assassinated. Jump in front of me. It's like a crazy dog party. You can jump in front of him.
Right.
Now all of you are going to have to make routing rolls to see whether you jump in front of the bullet and succeed in dying.
So stats 0, 1, 2.
1, 2, 3. I mean, depends.
I was thinking 1, 2, 3, but 0, 1, 2 could probably work as well. It depends on what that math thing is, and that's
Let's
not
try
my
0,
forte.
1, 2 for now, and then if it becomes too much of an issue in the first game, we can buff it.
Sure.
It's basically, unless we set our threshold for starting to get glitch dice ridiculously low, they're identical.
Yeah, so 0, 1, 2. Let's do that.
And I think we want we want these people to be pretty damn good. And so basic stuff should just be no glitch dice. Like stuff that
taking a shot. Taking a shot is a 0, like taking a standard shot shootout style.
Yeah, you've got tight aim, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like doing weird stuff is like the ricochet shot. That's like a glitch die. Is what I'm thinking.
I think it shouldn't be something we standardize too much. I think it should be given interpretation to the DM. But there should be an idea of how difficult it is. So firing from the atmosphere is a 6.
The other thing we have is that we could also give everyone one tag as their descriptor.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because then there's an additional kind of benefit to dying. Because not only do you get to change your route and toot and shooting, you get to change what your tag is.
Also, or maybe you only get to change what your tag is.
I like the. I mean, the question. So, because obviously, I don't want there to be too much feature creep. Is does this tag work the same as the world tags in? Okay, yeah. So it can cause you to do better or worse at things.
It's a tag.
What?
If a thing has a tag and you use the tag, you roll one.
What defines what tags you get? Is it randomly rolled?
You pick because it's your character.
Then okay, yeah, I guess that can work.
If some idiot says invincible, then you just make that apply in only the most very limited of situations.
You're invincible. Well, you're going to keep drowning here for infinity. Whatever he said.
I mean, basically, I mean, there's depending on how you define the deep lore of that. So we've got our kind of time cowboy saloon in a different dimension, and it's full of time cowboys that are coming to this planet to solve the issue. And it turns out that currently the problem is safe cracking, and 3 people have died trying to crack this safe. So somebody rolls a character and their tag is I forget the word. Great, this safe cracking expert. I don't know.
Yeah, they're like safe cracker McGraw.
Yeah, and that's cool because you've killed your character off to find something that can solve this problem right now, and that's fine. That's cool. It means that it's going to be the safe cracker McGraw is going to be useless any other time.
I mean, it also, but the thing is, if you make him be almost exact, if you don't reassign stats, he's also quite similar to Swift Hands McGraw, who was your previous character.
Okay. I like.
So you don't have to do another introduction.
That's fair. I like the idea. Okay, so it seems that just because we've made it so that missing is a thing, right? Missing is a thing. I think if we do that, we should give up that you roll a random bullet, because it should be either one or the other. It should be either you can miss, but it's set, or you cannot miss, but it is random.
Each day, you load your gun with 6 bullets.
Yep, and you can choose one of those 6 bullets to fire.
Well, I think you've got. I like the idea that you've got to do them in order, because it means you've got to. If your plan goes awry, you've got to sort of scrabble to.
Now think about how the bullets you have left apply to the circumstance you're now in.
Sure, I think we can try it. Certainly, I'm not sure how well that's going to work in practice, but we can certainly try.
I still am kind of in love with the idea that loading your gun whenever the heck you do that is from a random pool. I think that is a thing, and then you get to assign, the order that you put it in your gun and stuff like that.
I don't know if they should always be random. I like the idea of being able to find things in the world that you can tap to.
Is a thing that you can have relatively well controlled, especially if the words that are in the pool are generated by the players. Then you essentially set the tone of what your guns do.
I like the idea that there can be multiple sources where you get the bullets from. So source 1 and the most standard is, start of game, you say, I have bullet for huge, for example.
Yeah, you pull them out the hat at the beginning of the game.
Or even just say, like, these are the ones I want. And then second is scenario specific. So you go into a room, you see a ghost, you have the ghost tag now. I like the third one being something called wild card, which could be like maybe a limited resource or something, where you essentially say, I play my wild card, and because you've done that, you now can get a bullet back, because presumably otherwise you just spend them. But that attribute you get is completely random. And so it could be helpful or not.
I think we're missing an opportunity to call it an ace in the hole there.
Let's do ace in the hole, like any card-based metaphor. But I like, that sounds cool, because I like the idea of at some point something random can happen as opposed to just having stuff you set or stuff you find.
So the idea is that you can do it once when your gun is empty,
or maybe
you can just pull
once as long as you spent one bullet. Because there might be a scenario where all the bullets you have in your gun, like you spent one, and now you have another scenario, and you have 5 bullets, and none of them are worth anything.
Empty your bullets, because the wonderful thing as GM is that if players shoot random things, that can add loads of chaos to the scenario.
So, I guess here's the thing. So resetting is a main mechanic of this world. We've removed health, so that isn't a thing that forces you to reset.
I mean, lots of people being dead would, because you only get new reinforcements on the reset.
Oh yeah, but that's situation cost.
A couple of ideas actually about world reset. Actually, because we touched on this, but I don't think we actually cemented that in. It kind of feels that world reset is a majority vote based on the play. It means that there's a minimum 3-player thing that you'd have to do.
I don't know. It's a majority vote based on the living players.
Also true. Although
has anyone here read Die?
Oh, the Kieran Gillen comic.
Yeah. And at the end, it's sort of one of the things that's established is that you need, in order to go home, you need the vote to be unanimous to going home, but only living players get a vote. And apparently, the dead players come sort of as shades, and they can kill living players to nab their spots. It's a very good comic.
Interesting. I mean, it depends on when you get new bodies. Because we've suggested the idea that if you die, then you can absolutely get a new body again, but we've not really determined when.
On the reset.
Sure.
So yeah, I think not getting to vote would probably be one good way to have any form of penalty, like at least some inconvenience towards.
Like honestly, most things in this game are going to be opportunity cost,
and
I think that's actually something that doesn't happen in a lot of games. So I think we should hammer that.
Okay. Yeah. Then another thing that might be something to think about is how many actions in a day, for example. Like, is there a finite number of rolls that the team can do before the day ends, and then you have to decide whether you reset or not?
It's not finite, but I would encourage GMs to spread things out, have things happen at schedules. Like, you're only going to be able to do things at certain times, and if you miss that window, then you've missed the window. You know? Think of it like a Hitman game. There's just so much going on that you can't do everything.
One thing, and to be fair, you may have covered this when I was, silent for completely reasonable reasons, not that my computer shut down. How do you decide who Jeff is? Will that be a role, or will the GM just sort of pick?
I think it's...
I think it's a pick.
I don't know. I think it's a cards thing.
Okay.
So the GM doesn't know.
Oh,
Because the time sheriff shouldn't know.
Yeah. Okay. So that would therefore mean that it would be a circumstance where the GM, the time sheriff, commit to my own bit, Nathan. The time sheriff, I guess, writes down what the mission is for Jeff. Because then otherwise there's no real way to put a distinction between. And so they write down what the mission is for Jeff, but then don't know who it goes to. That's fine. I'm okay with that.
Okay, but how do we do that in a way that, we're sort of... Can we work that on this? Because we're sort of Discord. Is there any way to assign roles that not even the... Do you know what I'm getting at?
I'll work something out.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
We'll make it happen.
Yeah.
That's how you solve world peace.
Right, so I think we have our game, we have our mechanics. We're going to need to write up a bit of advice for the time sheriff because this is going to be a tricky one.
Yeah,
but I think
but that's
we've
fine.
basically got
It's just
everything.
advice on how the difficulty works and things like that.
Right, so we need to decide who's running, and we also need to decide. We need to basically go. What are people looking forward to the most? Is there any particular thing you're looking forward to seeing? We'll do that first.
Oh, I'm looking forward to seeing us. I know it's going to sound odd, but fail because I kind of want to see how the consequences play out. I think
Yeah.
we designed it where dealing with how you've messed up is a key theme of the game. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking forward to.
Cool.
If you think I'm not going to intentionally fail at the worst possible
Oh,
opportunities,
please
then you don't know
Oh
me.
no.
Ah,
I'm looking forward to some absolutely ridiculous bullets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to. At some point, there is going to be a situation where everyone's like, "I need to die first." No, I need to die first, and it's just the most intense game of "No
Yep.
me, no me." Like I really like the idea of stupid
Awesome.
stuff happening.
I am definitely looking forward to, and so to because there was an appalling response to me saying that earlier. I've been playing a lot of the Blades in the Dark, and that is a lot of setting yourself up to fail to make things more interesting. I mean that, not actually directly.
Oh no,
you
I
over.
kind of get you.
Yeah. But also the idea of like, I have one bullet left in my gun, and it is not appropriate to this situation, but oh loud, we're gonna make it work.
Yeah, because otherwise you can't use your ace in the hole.
Okay, so who wants to run?
I mean, have I actually run any games on this podcast yet?
You haven't in a while.
I'm trying to think if I actually have.
I mean, I am so down to run this. Oh my god, but
oh yeah, let Nathan run this.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, you can do the next one purple
Fine.
because there's two things,
there's 2 sets.
I know.
and you'll get the probably less horribly butchered one, so it's fine.
Yeah, please give me the broken version because I will horribly enjoy that.
Okay, so we've got our players, we've got our game.
Would you like to sign off, Nathan?
Howdy, partners. I'm not going to keep doing that.
I'll do that.
Oh, please don't.
Do
No,
it
no, 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 no.
I once tried to do a cowboy. No, I think I tried to do it was a pirate accent, and it ended up being a cowboy, so it was that way around. But no, we're not doing that. But what I will say is that in the please expect a number of mysterious silver cowboy hatted folk to show up in your nearby town, shoot everybody at the pub, and not kill them, but maybe turn them into crabs next time on Join the Adventure. Roll on the adventure. God damn it! I'm good at
Well,
this.
I guess on that we'll sign off. See you later, guys.
Leave that in.
Bye.